I'm Joe Grizzly, bitch.
What up, me militia? I mean Joe Grizzly. And when I'm not witnessing the death of a horror cinematic universe, I'm at the Grizzly Cave, watching movies, reading comics, listening to metal, and of course, crushing beers. And I am back after a little bit of a hiatus to bring y'all my review of The Conjuring Last Rites, the seemingly final movie in the Conjuring Universe. Allegedly. So, does this movie live up to the hype of being a grand finale for an entire cinematic universe, or an alleged grand finale of an entire cinematic universe? Let's find out. This is Grizzly Grade Reviews. In 1986, Ed and Lorraine Warren were once again called upon for their services by a family in Pennsylvania who is being played by a malevolent spirit. But unbeknownst to the Warrens, this malevolent force has personal ties, as it dates back to their very first case that they ever worked. So I have been a fan and a little bit of a defender of the Conjuring Universe since its conception. I have no doubt that everyone can agree that the first two Conjuring films are solid. They're really good. Probably two of the best horror films that have come out in the last 25 years. I think they would definitely make a top 50 list. And I think that some of the other entries in the franchise are decent as well. I really enjoy Annabelle Creation and Annabelle Comes Home. I think those movies are awesome. And there are aspects of the other movies that have been released that I also like. However, I do think that the one thing that has plagued this franchise is the need for them to not place their people or their characters in any kind of danger. Like, you know that these characters are going to persevere, no one's going to die, and that they just got very stagnant on their writing and their creativity. We have so much material here to build this incredible interlocking story across this entire cinematic universe, and I feel like that they have done nothing but drop the ball on that this entire time. At one point, this universe was very solid. It was one of those universes that, although not as intricate as the Marvel Cinematic Universe, was one of those ones that was getting to that point. It was getting to the point where they were interlocking everything, and they were getting stuff together and putting things in motion to where everything would eventually culminate into one big finale. And unfortunately, that never happened. And I think that it's not all the studio's fault. I do think that COVID had a big impact on that, just like it did on a lot of movie universes and franchises. I just feel like that since then they have done nothing to recover from that. And particularly their biggest probably marketing tool outside of Annabelle, which is the demon nun Valak, that character has been squandered so bad in its entire movie history. It's incredible how bad they squandered that villain, because the most menacing that villain has ever been displayed for us is in The Conjuring 2. And with the two standalone movies, I do think that those movies are solid with their atmosphere and even the lore that they're telling. I think that those movies are really solid. And I think that they do have some very creepy imagery and some very good jump scares. However, they're telegraphed from a mile away. And once again, none of the characters ever feel like they're in any real danger. And it kind of reduces these movies to the basic carnival rides that you see, where you get in a trolley and you go down this track and a bunch of stuff just jumps out at you, and it's very cheaply made. And I feel like that's what this movie franchise got reduced to, was cheap scares for a cheap price. And that's unfortunate. And allegedly, this movie, The Conjuring Last Rites, is allegedly the last movie in this cinematic universe. That this cinematic universe is supposedly going to be dead after this movie. Then one of the producers said this is the end of phase 1, and I don't know what the fuck that means. That's kind of nuts for them to say that's the end of phase 1, but however, here we are. And I just feel like that it's time to put this franchise to bed, and I feel like that this movie should have went out with a bigger bang than what it did, and instead it went out with a whimper. And that's not necessarily bad, but it's not great either. So starting out with the positives, I think that once again Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are fantastic as Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they bring a certain humanity to those two characters that makes them even more human and way more likable than even the real life Ed and Lorraine Warren, who, as we all know, have been since defrauded and shown to be not very good people. And I feel like that the work that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga has done in regards to bringing these characters to life on the screen is something that should be commended. Their on-screen chemistry is so well done that you really think that they are a real-life couple and that they have been together for decades, and their love just seems real. And I like the way that they have this very relatable relationship, and on top of all that, outside of their paranormal adventures, they have a very relatable life. They have problems outside of their job. They have lives outside of their job. They're two loving parents. They have a family. They have a home to take care of. And I felt like that this movie really put that on full display, and it done a very good job of keeping those characters grounded and keeping them in a state to where we as the audience could definitely relate to them, even though one is a psychic medium and the other one is a demon hunter / demonologist. I think that Mia Tomlinson as Judy Warren also was really good in this movie. She has this all-American girl, the perfect daughter persona about her, and in the moments of which she is tormented by the same gift that her mother has, she is very compelling and very believable that it is something that she is terrified of and something that she doesn't necessarily want to be a part of, but understands that it is ultimately most likely her destiny. I think that Ben Hardy does a good job of playing Tony Sparrow, which is the fiance of Judy, of being this very much fish out of water component to this movie, where he is so in love with Judy and wants to do anything he can to help her or her family or make her happy, that he is throwing himself willingly into this world that is very alien to him. And it's not that he is unaware of what the Warrens actually do. I think that he didn't understand the scale in which they did it. And when he is introduced into this, he willingly hops in with both feet, and all he wants to do is to help. And that was a very believable character as well. And he does a really good job of being the person who listens to Ed and Lorraine and does everything that they say to do in order to help vanquish this evil that has set upon this family in Pennsylvania, and not only has ties to the Warrens themselves. I think that the 80s aesthetic that we get here is very well done. It's definitely not the flamboyant version of the 80s that we get, but this is very Reagan-esque era type 80s, where you have the blue collar family working in the steel mills of this town, and the backdrop of that suburb that is pretty much the town that is around this steel mill. And I feel like that they choose really good music in the soundtrack that is not just the paint by number soundtrack that we always get. I mean, you got music by The Cult here and stuff like that, and I felt like that was very well done. And I just feel like that if you're going to do the 80s, we don't always have to have the flamboyant version of the 80s with the neon and the high tops and the teased hair and stuff like that. That's not how every single person in the 80s dressed or looked, and I felt like that they did a really good job with that. I think that there are some pretty good jump scares in this movie. Just like there should be. You kind of expect there to be pretty good jump scares in these Conjuring films. These were pretty effective. They had me jumping several times, and they wouldn't necessarily telegraph like they normally are. So they did a pretty damn good job with that. I also want to commend some of the imagery that they had in this movie. There is moments in this movie where there is a lot of blood, and I'm not talking about the one in the trailer with the sink that overflows with blood. There is moments where this entity is messing with our characters and has these acts of violence that are seemingly not happening, but the characters think that they're happening. And those acts of violence are pretty freaking gnarly, and I like it. I liked how they kicked it up a notch with that, and that kind of makes this movie a little more dangerous, if that makes any sense. Our characters actually felt like that they were in danger, and I did appreciate that, because that's something that this entire franchise has been missing for most of its existence. Going back to Ed and Lorraine Warren and the Warren family, I loved the importance of family and how much these characters care about each other, and how their whole aesthetic outside of the paranormal stuff is so damn relatable, and how people strive to have that good family atmosphere and that good family dynamic. And I felt like that might be the best part of this movie, is the emotional cues and the love that this family has for each other. I thought that was super well done, and like I said before, probably the highlight of the film. And that segues into this being a good send-off for the Warrens, and how this is a decent ending to their story. There are some things that I have a problem with, but overall, as far as the emotional side and how that was handled, I feel like that they handled it very well as a pretty decent send-off. Moving on to the mixed aspect is the entity itself, or the entities itself. I'm not going to go into spoilers on the entire dynamic of this entity, but I did like the concept, the base concept of this entity and its mission. I do like that. I do think that it is treated like, I do feel like that they hold the audience's hand and try to make the audience think that there's some kind of big reveal in the movie, that this entity is tied to the Warrens and wants Judy, essentially. And that was something that I did feel like was kind of treating its audience like we're a bunch of morons and we had to be told what's happening. But they treated it like a big reveal. Just didn't really make sense. But I like the base concept of this entity. The problem that I have with it is, after you have given us these demons like the Annabelle demon and the Valak the demon nun, and you have presented it, particularly Valak, you have presented Valak as this ultimate big bad, the Thanos or dark side of the Conjuring universe, that not even the blood of Christ can stop this demon. And after you've introduced that so early on in the series, when you have a grand finale like this, an entity like this is very underwhelming. And it just doesn't have that grand pop to it, that big showdown feel to it. And that was something that definitely put a damper on it. But again, I do like the base concept of this entity. I do think that there are moments where we get our typical scares or chills from these movies, where like there is an instance in particular where the mother of this family in Pennsylvania is being plagued by this entity, is down in the basement doing laundry, and in the background, over in this dark corner on this wall, is the scariest avatar of this entity is hiding in the shadows, and we can see it, and it's in her periphery, and it is pretty freaking spooky. And then the lady turns around and looks at this entity directly and is obviously petrified, thinks that there is someone in her house, and she doesn't run. She is completely like paralyzed by fear, and she backs up slowly, and then when she turns the light on, it disappears. And that's a gimmick that's been done multiple times in this franchise, and I felt like that this was still pretty damn effective. It isn't as effective as the scenes from like the Conjuring 2 involving Valak, like those are all-timers, but I do think that that one in particular was so well done. I also think that there is a gimmick or a scare in the movie where there is like a pantry that's open and it's really dark, and the wife is walking around the kitchen while the kids play, and they establish early in the movie that the kids will go into this dark closet and hide and grab the phone cord and pull it into the closet, essentially aggravating the mother while she's working around the kitchen. And it's telegraphed from a mile away, you know what's going to happen, and that was like the one that really was telegraphed, but nevertheless, I felt like it was very, very effective. I also think the score is pretty decent in this movie. I liked it. It's not this spectacular score, hence why it's in the mix section, but it's solid nevertheless. I just wanted something maybe a little bit more grandiose for this finale. Nevertheless, it's still pretty effective. Now moving on to the negatives. The one thing that is probably the biggest problem that I have with the movie is the consistent gags and gimmicks that this universe is known for. And I don't know why this universe never broke away from that, and I think it has to do with the director that they continuously use. Like the last few Conjuring Universe movies have been directed by the same guy. His name is escaping me right now. I think these are the only movies he's ever done, but his style of directing does not match up with James Wan's style of directing. I think he did La Llorona, The Conjuring 3, and he did The Nun 2. And I don't think that his style of directing works at all. I don't think that it is nowhere near as effective as James Wan's directing. And that puts a damper on things because it makes the movie incredibly predictable, and it makes it just the same. We hitting the same notes every time. We're hitting the same scares. Now, again, I think that some of those scares are effective, but nevertheless, it's like that is the movie's bread and butter. That's the franchise's bread and butter, and that bread and butter has been stale and moldy for a while. And I just wanted a little more creativity, particularly in the finale of this universe, if this is the finale. The other thing too is although I understand that this is allegedly the finale, I think the movie is too long. I think that there are moments in the movie that are kind of just rinse and repeat and monotonous, and it's something that could have made the movie a little bit better of an experience if they would have trimmed the fat on this movie a little bit, because it was 2 hours and 15 minutes long, and right off the bat, I cannot tell you how long the other Conjuring movies were. They could have been longer, they could have been shorter, but I didn't feel that runtime, and I felt the runtime in this a few times. Not all the way through, but a few times I was like kind of bored. And it had a lot to do with just excess stuff that should have just been cut out of the movie. So this being the finale of the franchise, I do feel like it was fairly lackluster, and I wanted something a little more grandiose. But I will say that the characters of Ed and Lorraine Warren were given a pretty good send-off, and that was something that I was pretty satisfied about. I just wanted their last mission or last job to be something more of like facing down a big bad or something like that, instead of this, although pretty powerful entity that does have like a personal tie to them. I just wanted it to feel like that they vanquished the ultimate evil. And I understand that sounds very cliche, but it was just something that I was really expecting. And we did not get that. But we did get a decent movie. And it is better than the last Conjuring movie, but it is nowhere close to the first two. And even to me, it's not as good as Annabelle Creation, and it's not as good as Annabelle Comes Home. And I know that the Annabelle Comes Home take is a hot one, but I really enjoyed that movie. And I feel like it is in the top 5 in the entire universe. And Conjuring Last Rites is pretty much right outside that top 5 or right inside of it. And that's not necessarily a very high bar, but it makes for a decent movie. So with all that being said, The Conjuring Last Rites gets a 3.25 out of 5. If you're a fan of the Conjuring Universe, I'd say this is a must-see, and if you're a casual fan of the universe, I'd say it's a pretty decent watch. But who knows? Maybe y'all liked the movie better than I did. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. And that's going to bring this video to an end. Thank you all so much for your continued support and patience. Without y'all, this channel isn't possible. And if you like this video, like it. And if you like it enough, please head over to the channel, hit the subscribe and bell button so you never miss a video. Also, please follow me on all social media platforms so you can get channel updates, movie news, and all forms of badassery. I did manage to get a new Friday the 13th video out, so if you want to go check that out, I'd really appreciate it. It's on Jason Lives. It's one of my favorites of the franchise, so give that a listen. As far as what's coming up next, I don't know yet. Just stay tuned, and remember, I'm Joe Grizzly, bitch.